What's going on, y'all? And welcome to another episode of Resilient Kings Podcast.
Whoa. Now you about to start some controversy here.
I am your host, Yaron Brown.
Hold on a minute. This is a Resilient King alert. Resilient King alert. You ain't gonna roll past that.
This is Resilient Kings Podcast coming to you.
Let's go. What's going on, y'all? Welcome to the first episode of Resilient Kings Podcast. Again, that's a Resilient Kings Podcast. I am your host, Yaron Brown, and I just want to say I am so excited and nervous to bring to you the first podcast related to Resilient Kings. So some of you may be asking, what is Resilient Kings Podcast? And we'll get into that throughout this podcast. What I want you to know originally is where the idea came from, right? So you all don't know this, and I'm going to be sharing pieces of myself with you. What I want you to know is I am a huge, was to some degree, still am a huge Tupac fan, right? So one of Tupac's works, which was a poem that he wrote, it was the rose that grew out of the concrete or from the concrete. And in that poem, what I began to ascertain from it is that, man, what he's talking about is some resilient kings, i.e., the Resilient Kings Podcast. So this podcast will be focusing in on men, male issues, our development, our growth, our understanding, our challenges, all those different things. We have a unique place in this arena. I am a licensed professional counselor in several states. I've seen men for over, 20 some years. No, not that long. I ain't that old. No, I've seen men for probably 10 or 11 years. That's been the focus of my practice. And in this, I've seen so many men struggle with so many different things. And I want to bring that to light. I am only one person and I can see only so many men. This podcast gives me a platform to share my experiences about what I've seen. Also bringing in other men to share their experiences so that we can become a collective of men that are growing in a very unique and healthy way. As men, we don't go to therapists, right? And our resiliency could be turned up so high that we don't take care of ourselves because everything is about us being resilient. And so what I want to bring awareness to is that we are very resilient and we cannot be resilient at times too. And that's okay. And I want to bring light to that for each and every one of you. I want us to have this time, this sacred space for us to share in those experiences. I will have some time where I will just be speaking to you, and other times we'll have guests that are sharing their experiences, and I'll be sharing in my experiences. I will be providing you with great content to really help us grow as men and have a community that we can join and connect with each other in a real way. So join us for Resilient Kings Podcast. We're going to take a quick break and we'll be right back with the next section. Welcome back. I know a lot of you may be wondering, how did you get started in this field? I've always been a talker. I've always done things to help others, and I've always been an amazing listener, i.e., a therapist. So because I've been a therapist, I've had the fortune of working mostly with men and couples. I started out with young men. I gradually grew into dealing with young adults, and then now I deal with all men and I deal with couples. What I found through this process is that oftentimes men have crafted this idea of masculinity. And oftentimes it doesn't fit well in the relationships, whether it be marital, familial, parent child. All these relationships become problematic because men have challenges connecting because they bought into this idea of what a real man is, right? That is determined by one set of criteria, that we oftentimes are in isolation. This space is to create community. This space is not to create isolation, right? Just because we are men doesn't mean that we have to be isolative. And what I mean by that is that you may be around people, but still identify yourself or still feel a level of isolation. You may be around your significant other, whomever that may be, and still feel like you're in isolation because you can't convey who you are and what's going on with you. So these are things that a lot of men face. And because they face these things and I see them consistently, I wanted to bring a podcast to address some of these things, to expose men to a variety of ideas of what masculinity is, a variety of ideas of how they could be themselves, right? So began to start thinking through that process. For instance, if I were to ask you today, what are masculine traits, right? You'll give me these glowing reviews or identities of what masculinity is and how these masculine traits exist, right? To some degree, we would say that they have a level of continuity and strength, right? But if I ask you about feminine traits, you may say something completely different. And 9 times out of 10, those things that you are saying, you've been conditioned to believe that those things are feminine and therefore they are bad or negative, right? I'm sure many of you have said and or heard another male say, stop acting like a girl. Well, what does that mean, right? To act like a girl. Is that a negative connotation? 9 times out of 10, when we have said it, because I have raised my hand to say I've said it in the past as well, we are using that as a negative connotation because we do not prioritize and or embrace the idea of having feminine traits. So we get into these relationships or we get into these situations and wonder, what are we doing in them and why can't I be myself or why do I feel so conflicted? It's because you are not being your authentic self oftentimes. Just being honest with you. Don't shoot the messenger, right? So saying that to say, we have some space to grow. And we're going to talk about how to grow in that space next. All right. So stay tuned for more. Have you ever wondered why you picked the mate that you picked? Why they get on your nerves so much? Why you get into conflict with them? Well, part of that is just not them. Part of that is you. Do you want to find out more about why that is you? Then stay tuned for more from Resilient Kings, right? We are going to be talking about all those different things. We're going to be talking about the idea of, I'm going to say the V word, all right? Don't get shook up by it. Vulnerability. Men oftentimes do not show a level of vulnerability. And I hear some men talking, well, I can't be vulnerable because if I am, then I'm going to get taken advantage of. Then maybe you're around the wrong people. And maybe you're around them for the wrong reasons if you can't be authentically you and show a full spectrum or range of what masculinity is. I'm just saying, right? We're also going to talk about the fear of not being in control, right? That's another thing that we'll be talking about. When I'm not in control, what causes me so much distress? And then what do I do to try and exhibit that control? And do I think of anyone else when I'm doing it? 9 times out of 10, you don't. You don't think about it, right? You'll also be hearing a lot of R&B, hip hop, cultural references as well, because I'm a hip hop head and I love R&B. So you'll hear some of those references as well. So I just want you to begin to identify that, right? We're going to talk about the potential causes of why your relationships aren't working. And just as a teaser, I want you to know that you're probably involved in that process, right? We're going to talk about how to support our significant others, and not in the way that we want to do it, in the way that they're asking us to do it. And if we can't, what's roadblocking us or what's getting in our way, right? These are all the topics that we're going to be covering and more through Resilient Kings podcast. We are here to support you, men. We are here to ensure that we create a community that you can trust, that you can gain something from, and where you are feeling uplifted, educated, and just a level of empowerment, right? Well, let me take that last one back, because a lot of y'all are overly empowered. Y'all feeling yourselves, right? And you don't have to. We'll be talking about your health, right? And how, yet again, we take resiliency to the max, and we are doing too much, which means that we can be injured, hurt, or whatever, and we just suck it up and try and brush it off. Next thing we know, we dead or seriously ill because we didn't go to the doctor, because we can tough it out, right? That is a symptom of this idea, this singularity idea of masculinity, that men always have to show this toughness, right? And that's not always the case. We're going to be talking about those things, right? So what I want you to do in this process, throughout this process, in our development of this community, is I want you to drop me a line. For those that don't know what that is, send me an email letting me know what your concerns are, what topics you want to hear, right? Talk to me about constructive ideas or ways that I can better this to support you and what you're going through. If you email me trolling, trying to argue with me, trying to talk me down, save it for your mama, because I'm not listening to it. I'm just telling you, that's just what it is. I'm not here for it. I'm here to uplift. I'm here to help grow. I'm here to help us as men develop, right? I may come on here and talk about my struggles, past and present, right? I may provide you with some stories about how I grew up and how I developed and how my thinking was before I went into therapy. Not as a therapist, but actually went into therapy so that I could be a better husband, a better father, a better human being, and a better therapist. We're going to be focusing in on your overall well-being and your mental health. Yes, men do go to therapy. I believe it because that is my profession. That's who I see. We just don't talk about it. But men go to therapy. It's not a lot of men that are therapists. And to pick a good therapist, they don't have to be a man. But it's important for you to go see someone, right? A lot of you men are reactive instead of being proactive in your life, right? Being proactive is going to see one to see if what I'm doing is effectively helping me live the life that I want to live. If you aren't doing that, guess what? You are hurting yourself and you are hurting those that you love. Trust and believe that. All right. So when I tell you stories from my youth, they're going to sound crazy. Some of them may even sound like they really didn't exist. Right. But please believe me, they do. I don't know how I could verify it. Maybe I'll bring a family member on that'll verify, I guess, what I've experienced. I don't know, but we'll talk through that, right? We are going to remove this feeling of isolation, or at least attempt to, through the Resilient Kings podcast. I want to thank you. Please like and subscribe to our many platforms that we have available. Go on www.yaronbrown.com to see more content, to see what we have available. I am not trying to sell you anything, nor do I want you to buy anything. What I really want you to be is the healthiest man that you can be for yourself, for those in which you love, and those that love you. I want you to really connect with this idea of being relational with others instead of trying to be aggressive or demanding with others. And we will also talk about this fake idea of being an alpha male, where it came from, where it started, how it took off, and how it's yet another part of this singular idea of what masculinity is. So stay tuned for more episodes. Again, subscribe, like, send to other men that you believe can benefit from this. All right. I can't wait for this first season. I have some interesting guests that are not, they're regular people like you and me, that have struggles like you and me, that have successes and failures like you and me, that have challenges like you and me. We're going to work through this together to be better men. All right, y'all. Until next time, have a great day.